She was 72 years old. Her clothes were simple. A plain gray wrapper, a faded blue blouse, old leather slippers that had walked 1,000 miles. She carried one small bag, not a designer bag, not a suitcase with wheels and a brand name, just a plain brown bag, the kind market women carry. She walked slowly through Lagos International Airport. Nobody looked at her twice. To everyone around her, she was just an old woman, maybe somebody's grandmother, maybe a village woman visiting her children in the city. Nobody knew, nobody could have guessed, that this old woman in a plain gray wrapper had built the very airline whose planes were parked outside those windows. Her name was Margaret Adora Okonkwo, but the world that mattered called her Mama Okonkwo, and the airline called Okonkwo Air had been built with her hands. Her tears, her late husband's dream, and 40 years of her life. But tonight, none of that mattered to the young woman standing at the first-class check-in desk. The young woman's name was Stephanie, 26 years old, bright red lipstick, perfect nails, a uniform so pressed it looked like it had never been worn before. She looked up when the old woman approached the counter, and something changed in her face. Not warmth, not welcome, something closer to irritation. "Ma, this is first-class check-in." The old woman placed her ticket on the counter quietly. Stephanie picked it up, looked at it, looked at the old woman, looked back at the ticket. "This ticket? Where did you get this?" "I bought it." "You bought a first-class ticket?" "Yes." Stephanie's eyes moved slowly over the old woman. The plain wrapper, the faded blouse, the worn slippers. She smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "Ma, are you sure this is your ticket? Sometimes family members buy tickets and give to the wrong person by mistake." The old woman looked at her calmly. "It is my ticket. My name is on it." Stephanie looked to the name again. Her expression did not change. "Okay, wait here." She picked up her phone, called someone, spoke in a low voice. Then another person came. A supervisor, a young man named Kevin, 28, sharp uniform, the kind of man who had been told he was important and had believed it completely. Kevin walked to the counter, looked at the old woman, looked at the ticket. "Good evening, Ma. I understand there might be a small confusion." "There is no confusion. That is my ticket." "Yes, but Ma, you see, first class is a premium cabin. It requires a certain—" He paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound like what he was thinking. "Confirmation process. I confirmed when I bought the ticket." Kevin smiled the same smile Stephanie had smiled. "Ma, do you have any proof of payment? A bank statement? A receipt?" The old woman opened her small brown bag. She brought out a printed receipt, placed it on the counter. Kevin looked at it. His smile stayed fixed, professionally fixed, the way people keep smiling when they have already decided. "Ma, I'm going to be very honest with you. We have a situation this evening. A very important passenger needs this seat. A business class passenger has requested an upgrade, and unfortunately your seat is the only one available. We would love to move you to business class. We will give you full comfort." The old woman was quiet for a moment. "You want to move me from the seat I paid for? We will fully compensate. You want to move me because of how I look?" Kevin's smile flickered, just slightly. "Ma, that is absolutely not. I have heard you." She picked up her receipt quietly. "I will sit in my seat." Kevin leaned slightly forward. His voice dropped. The professional warmth left it. "Ma, I don't think you understand. This is not a request." And that was the moment. That was the sentence that changed everything. Not today, not immediately, but eventually. Everything that happened after started with those 7 words. "This is not a request." 2 flight attendants came. A young woman named Beezy and another named Tund. They walked the old woman through the gate politely but firmly. The way you walk someone when you want them to feel like they have a choice, but they don't. They put her in an economy seat. Row 34. Middle seat. Between a large man who immediately fell asleep on her shoulder and a young woman chewing gum loudly with headphones in. She sat there, 72 years old, owner of Okonkwo Air, in a middle economy seat on her own airline. She did not cry. She did not complain. She looked out the small window, and she thought about her husband Emmanuel, who had died 17 years ago. And she thought about what he used to say. Adora, let them show you who they are first. Then you decide what to do. She closed her eyes. She decided. The flight was 4 hours. Lagos to Abuja. When the plane landed and the passengers began to leave, the old woman was the last to stand. Beezy, the flight attendant, passed her in the aisle. Their eyes met. Beezy looked away quickly. The old woman walked out slowly. Through the gate. Through the arrivals hall. To where a black car was waiting. The driver, a young man named Chakwudi, saw her coming and immediately stepped out. He opened the door. Stood straight. Good evening, Ma. How was the flight? She looked at him. Bring me my phone. She had one call to make. One. She sat in the back of the car and dialed. It rang twice. A man answered. His voice was alert immediately. The way people are alert when a certain number calls. Ma. Daniel. Yes, Ma. Is everything all right? I want a full board meeting. Tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. Silence for exactly 2 seconds. Yes, Ma. I'll arrange it immediately. And Daniel. Ma. Pull the personnel files for Kevin Adeyemi and Stephanie Ease. Duty Station Lagos International. Tonight. Another silence. Yes, Ma. She ended the call. She looked out the car window at the Abuja night. She was not angry. Anger was for people who were surprised. She was not surprised. She was decided. Now let me tell you who Margaret Adora Okonkwo really was. Because a story without roots has no weight. She was born in a small village in Anambra State. Third child of 7. Her father was a school teacher. Her mother sold akra outside the church every Sunday morning. They were not poor in the way that breaks people. They were poor in the way that teaches people. She was the sharpest child at her school. Every teacher said so. She won a state scholarship at 16. Went to university in Enugu. Studied business administration. That was where she met Emmanuel Okonkwo. He was a final year engineering student. Tall, quiet, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. He had a dream that everyone around him called foolish. He wanted to start an airline. In Nigeria, in 1981, when Nigerian aviation was controlled by the government and private airlines were almost impossible, everyone said he was dreaming. His own father said it. His friends said it. Even his lecturers, who liked him, said it gently over cups of tea. Margaret never said it. Not once. She said instead, tell me what you need. We will find a way. They married in 1983. Small ceremony. Village church. Her mother cried. His father did not come. They started with nothing. Emmanuel took a job as an engineer. She took a job in a trading company. They saved every naira. They lived in one room for 3 years. They did not buy new clothes for 2 years. In 1989, they bought their first small aircraft. Not new. Second-hand. It looked like it would fall apart. Emmanuel fixed it himself with 2 mechanics he trusted. Margaret named it Hope. Their first route was Lagos to Port Harcourt. The first flight had 11 passengers. She cooked the in-flight food herself. She also checked the tickets. She also cleaned the plane after landing. Emmanuel flew it. 11 passengers. 1 small aircraft. 1 dream. By 1995, they had 4 aircraft. By 2000, they had 12. By 2005, Okonkwo Air was the second largest domestic airline in Nigeria. Then Emmanuel got sick. Cancer. Diagnosed in 2006. He fought for 2 years. Margaret sat beside him every day that was not a work day. And even on work days, she found ways to sit beside him. He died in 2008. She did not stop. She could not stop. Because the airline was not just a business anymore. It was Emmanuel's dream made real. It was everything they had built from 1 room and 1 old aircraft and 11 passengers and food she cooked herself. She ran it alone. She expanded it. She took it international. By 2015, Okonkwo Air was flying to London, Dubai, and Johannesburg. By 2020, it was valued at over 4 billion naira. And Margaret Adora Okonkwo, the woman who had cooked in-flight food in 1989, was worth more than most people could count. But she still wore plain wrappers. She still carried a brown bag. She still walked through airports alone. Because Emmanuel used to say, the day you start needing people to recognize you is the day you have forgotten why you started. She never forgot why she started. The board meeting was at 8 o'clock the next morning. Okonkwo Air Headquarters, Abuja, 14th floor, 12 people around a long glass table. The company's managing director, Daniel Obi, 44 years old, sat at one end. He had worked for Okonkwo Air for 19 years. He had started as a ground crew supervisor. Margaret had promoted him herself 5 times. When she walked in, everyone stood. Not because protocol said so, because she was Margaret Okonkwo. She sat down. She looked at each face around the table slowly. Then she spoke. Last night, I flew Lagos to Abuja on flight OK 447. I was removed from my first-class seat by a supervisor named Kevin Adeyemi and placed in economy. The reason given was that an important passenger needed an upgrade. The real reason was how I was dressed. Complete silence. I want to know how many times this has happened to passengers on our airline. Not to me. To ordinary people. To people who saved their money for a first-class ticket and were moved because someone at a desk decided they did not look the part. No one spoke. Daniel. Ma, how many complaints of this nature have we received in the last 12 months? Daniel opened his folder. He already knew the number. He had pulled the reports at midnight when she called. 47 formal complaints, Ma. And those are only the ones reported. She looked at the table. 47. 47 people who were treated like they did not belong in a seat they paid for. I started this airline with 11 passengers. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. I cooked their food. I cleaned their seats. I treated every one of them like they had given me a gift by choosing to fly with us. Because they had. She looked at the folder. 47 people. Kevin Adeyemi was called to headquarters that afternoon. He had no idea why. He was told it was a routine staff review. He came in a fresh uniform. Confident. The way young men are confident when they believe they have done nothing wrong. He was taken to a meeting room. He sat down. He waited. The door opened, and the old woman from last night walked in. He stared. She sat down across from him. Behind her came Daniel Obi, and behind Daniel came 2 other board members. Kevin's confidence began to drain from his face slowly, like water from a cracked cup. Do you know who I am? The old woman asked. He shook his head slowly, but something in his eyes said he was beginning to understand that he should. My name is Margaret Idora Okonkwo. The silence that followed was the loudest silence Kevin Adeyemi had ever sat inside. Last night you told me that moving me from my seat was not a request. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. You looked at my clothes, and you decided I did not belong where I had paid to be. Ma, I did not know. You did not know who I was. She leaned forward slightly. But you knew I was a person. You knew I had a ticket. You knew I had a receipt. And you moved me anyway. His hands were shaking now. Both of them. On top of the table. Ma, please. I have a family. I have children, Ma. Please. She looked at him for a long time. I know you have a family. I know you have children. That is why I am sitting here talking to you, instead of simply signing a letter. He was crying now. Quietly. The kind of crying that happens when a person realizes fully what they have done and what it might cost them. Tell me why. He wiped his face. Ma, tell me why you moved me. The real reason. He was quiet for a long moment. Then quietly, painfully, she didn't look like she belonged there. The room was very still. Margaret's voice did not rise. I was sitting in front of you. And you said she. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Ma. I'm so sorry. Stephanie was called in separately. She was not crying when she walked in. She was still in her uniform, still composed. She had heard by now that something was happening. She had not heard exactly what. When she saw the old woman, her composure cracked. Immediately, like glass. Ma, sit down. She sat. You asked me where I got my ticket. Stephanie pressed her lips together. You asked me if a family member had given me the wrong ticket by mistake. You asked me this because you looked at me and decided that a woman dressed like me could not have bought a first-class ticket herself. Well, I didn't. You did. The voice was not cruel. That was the worst part. It was calm. The calm of someone who has already decided and is simply completing a necessary process. You did, and you have done it before. The reports show it. Stephanie's perfect composure was completely gone now. Ma, please. I worked so hard to get this job. My mother. I know about hard work. Margaret looked at her steadily. I know what it costs. I know what it means. Which is exactly why I will not pretend that what you did was small. What happened next surprised everyone in that building. Because Margaret Okonkwo did not fire them. Not immediately. She suspended them both. Full salary suspension. Pending a process. Then she did something nobody expected. She created a new policy. Effective immediately across all Okonkwo air stations worldwide. All front-facing staff were to undergo mandatory retraining. Not just customer service training. Something deeper. Something she wrote herself in 2 hours the night before. She called it the 11 passengers rule. It was named after the 11 people on that first flight in 1989. It said simply, every passenger who walks through our door has paid with money they earned. They have trusted us with their time, their safety, and their dignity. It does not matter how they are dressed. It does not matter how they speak. It does not matter if they look like they belong. They belong because they chose us, and we exist because of them. She had it printed and framed and placed at every check-in desk in every Okonkwo air station in the world. The story leaked. Of course it did. These things always do. A junior staff member told a friend. The friend posted on Twitter. By morning, it had 50,000 retweets. By evening, it was on every Nigerian news channel. The headline was simple. Okonkwo Air owner removed from first class on her own airline. Staff did not recognize her. The comments were not simple. They were everything. Outrage, laughter, disbelief, support, argument. Story after story from people who had been treated the same way on different airlines, on buses, in shops, in hospitals, in offices, because of how they looked, because of what they wore, because of someone behind a desk deciding they did not belong. Margaret read some of the comments in her office. She did not enjoy them. She was not doing this for comments. 3 days after the meeting, she went back to Lagos. Not by air this time. She drove. She went to her old neighborhood in Surulere, the one she and Emmanuel had lived in when they first came to Lagos. The small room. The building with the leaking roof that the landlord never fixed. The compound where 5 families shared one bathroom. She sat outside that building for a long time. A woman came out. Young, maybe 30. She looked at the old woman sitting outside and came closer. Good afternoon, Ma. Are you waiting for somebody? No. I used to live here. The young woman sat beside her on the low wall. Long time ago. Very long time ago. They sat in silence for a while. The young woman said, I saw you on the news. Margaret looked at her. You're the woman from the airline. Yes. The young woman was quiet. Then, I was removed from a bus last year. Long-distance bus. I had paid. The conductor said the seat was given to someone else. I stood the whole journey. 6 hours. Margaret looked at her. What is your name? Chisholm. Chisholm. I'm sorry that happened to you. Chisholm shrugged. The shrug of someone who has learned not to expect better. It happens. It should not happen. Chisholm looked at her. Something in her eyes shifted. The careful flatness that people wear when they have been disappointed too many times. It shifted. Just slightly. No, she said quietly. It should not. Margaret went home. She sat in her study. She looked at the photograph on her desk. Emmanuel, 1989, standing in front of the first aircraft, grinning like a boy who had been told he could fly, which was exactly what he was. You would have handled this differently, she said to the photograph. She smiled. Emmanuel would have laughed. He would have told the whole story with dramatic gestures. He would have made everyone in the room laugh and then made them think. She had always been the quieter one. But quiet was not the same as weak. Emmanuel had known that. You knew, she said. She touched the frame. Then she opened her laptop. She had work to do. There was a young man. This story needs him. Because every story that changes something needs a witness. Someone standing close enough to see it happen. Changed by what they see. His name was Emeka Okafor, 31 years old. He worked in the customer relations department of Okonkwo Air, Lagos office. He had been there for 3 years. Before that, he had worked in a small transport company. Before that, he had been unemployed for 2 years after university. He was good at his job, quiet, thorough, the kind of person who noticed things other people missed. He had been at the check-in area the night it happened. Not close enough to hear clearly, but close enough to see. He had seen the old woman approach the counter. He had seen Stephanie's face. He had seen Kevin come. He had seen the 2 flight attendants walk the old woman through the gate. He had stood there, watching, feeling something wrong in his chest, something he recognized. The specific discomfort of watching an injustice happen and not knowing if you have the right to say anything. He had not said anything. That was the thing that stayed with him. He had not said anything. When a story broke and the whole country was talking, Emeka sat at his desk and felt it again. That specific discomfort. Heavier now. He had seen it happen. He had said nothing. He wrote a message, deleted it, wrote it again. He sent it to the internal staff system. It was addressed to the office of the chairman. It said, "I was present at Lagos International Airport on the night in question. I saw what happened. I did not intervene. I want to formally say that I should have. I'm sorry I did not. I am willing to give a full account of what I witnessed if it would be useful. And I am willing to accept whatever consequence comes from my silence that night." He sent it. Then he sat back. He did not expect a reply. He got one. 3 days later. From Margaret Okonkwo herself. It said, "Mr. Okafor, thank you for your message. Honesty after the fact is still honesty. I would like to meet you. Please come to headquarters on Friday at 10. He read it 4 times. Then he called his mother. "Mama, the chairman of Okonkwo Air wants to meet me." His mother was quiet for exactly 1 second. "Which Okonkwo Air?" "Mama, there's only one." He drove to Abuja on Thursday night. He could not afford the flight. The irony of this was not lost on him. He arrived at headquarters on Friday at 9:45. He sat in the waiting area with his hands on his knees. At exactly 10, Daniel Obi came to get him. He was taken to a large office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Abuja. Photographs on the walls. The first aircraft. Routes painted on a map. Emmanuel Okonkwo at various ages. And everywhere, in small frames and large, ordinary people. Passengers. Ground staff. Mechanics. The people the airline was made of. Margaret Okonkwo was sitting at her desk. She looked smaller in person than on the news. Older. But something about her presence made the room feel full. "Sit down, Emeka." He sat. "You saw it happen." "Yes, Ma. Tell me exactly what you saw." He told her. Everything. Stephanie's face. Kevin's arrival. The 2 flight attendants. The old woman's back as she walked through the gate without argument, without raised voice, without anything except a quiet dignity that had made him feel ashamed of his own silence. When he finished, Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Why did you not say anything that night?" He looked at his hands. "I told myself it wasn't my department. That Kevin was senior to me. That I might be wrong about what I was seeing." He paused. "But I wasn't wrong. And those were excuses." Yes, they were. He looked up. He expected judgment. What he saw instead was something more like recognition. "I have made the same excuses," she said quietly. "In my life. At different times. For different things." She looked at the window. The difference between a good person and a better person is not that one never finds excuses. It is that one stops using them faster. He did not know what to say. She picked up a folder from her desk. "I have been looking at your file. 3 years in customer relations. Strong reports. You have resolved more passenger complaints than anyone in your department. You have also flagged 3 internal issues in writing. Issues other people noticed but did not flag." He was surprised. He had not known anyone had noticed those. "You notice things," she said, "and eventually you say something, even when it costs you." She put the folder down. I need people like that. Ma, I'm restructuring our passenger experience division. I need someone to lead the team that implements the 11 passengers policy across all stations. Someone who understands what it means from both sides of the counter. She looked at him directly. Someone who knows what it feels like to see a wrong and have to decide whether to speak. Emeka was completely still. Me? You wrote that letter when nobody was asking you to. When could have hurt you? When the easier thing was to stay quiet and let the story pass. She picked up his letter from the desk. It was printed out. She had kept it. This is not a small thing. His throat was tight. I should have spoken that night. Not after. Yes. And you will. Next time. And the time after that. Because now you know what the silence costs. She placed the letter down. Do you want the position? He said yes. Of course he said yes. But he said something else first. Ma, can I ask you something? Ask. When they moved you, when they put you in that middle seat, what were you thinking? She was quiet for a moment. I was thinking about Emmanuel, my husband. She looked at the photograph on her desk. He always said, let them show you who they are first. Then decide what to do. And what did you decide? She looked at him steadily. That the problem was not Kevin, not Stephanie, not those two flight attendants. The problem was a system that had slowly stopped seeing people, and that I had let it happen by staying in my office and looking at numbers instead of sitting in the seats. She paused. So I decided to change the system and to start sitting in the seats more often. The retraining began 6 weeks later. Every station, every shift, every role that touched a passenger. Emeka ran it. He traveled to Lagos, Port Harcourt, Abuja, Kano, London, Dubai, Johannesburg. He stood in front of staff members who were sometimes older than him, sometimes more senior, and he told them the story. Not just the story of what happened to Margaret Okonkwo, the story of the 11 passengers. The story of a woman who cooked in-flight food in 1989 because she believed that every person who chose to fly with them deserved to be treated like a gift. He told them about Chisholm, the woman who stood for 6 hours on a bus because a conductor decided someone else's money was worth more than hers. He told them stories that passengers had sent in, 47 complaints. And he told them that 47 was only the number of people who had bothered to write it down. He asked them to think about all the people who hadn't, who had just accepted it, who had learned to expect less. He told them the 11 passengers rule was not a policy. It was a memory, a reminder of what they were doing here and who they were doing it for. Kevin and Stephanie, you are waiting to hear what happened to them. They were suspended for 6 weeks. No pay. During that time, they were required to complete the retraining program. Not as staff, as participants, sitting with new hires and entry-level employees and people applying for front desk positions. Kevin sat in a room and listened to Emeka tell the story of what had happened. He listened to his own actions described without his name. He sat there and felt every word. On the last day of the program, participants were asked to write one sentence about what they were taking away. Kevin wrote, I looked at a woman and saw her clothes instead of her. Stephanie wrote, I asked someone where they got their ticket. That question was not about the ticket. Margaret read both sentences. She approved their return to work. Different stations, different roles. Starting again, from the beginning, earning their way back. 3 months after the incident, Okonkwo Air's passenger satisfaction scores were the highest they had been in 11 years. Staff had started something quietly among themselves. Whenever a passenger came to the desk who looked uncertain or out of place or nervous, instead of the look Stephanie had given the old woman, staff were trained to say one simple thing. Welcome. We're glad you chose us. That was it. For words. We're glad you chose us. It cost nothing. And something about those 4 words, said with actual meaning, not as a script, changed the temperature of the entire interaction. Emeka had suggested it during the training. Margaret had heard it and gone very quiet, because those are almost exactly the words she had said to the 11 passengers in 1989. Before the first flight, she had stood at the door of that small patched aircraft and said to each person who climbed on board, Thank you for trusting us. We are so glad you're here. She had forgotten she had said that. Emeka had never heard it, but somehow he'd said almost the same thing. She told him that. He looked at her. Maybe it's because the feeling is always the same, he said. When someone chooses you, you're just glad. She smiled. It was the smile of a woman thinking about her husband, about one small old aircraft, about 11 people who had no idea what they were part of. 6 months after the incident, a journalist requested an interview. Margaret agreed to it, not for her usual business magazine, for a general newspaper, the kind of paper that ordinary people read on buses and in markets and in barbershops. The journalist was a young woman, 24, eager but not aggressive. She came with a notebook and one small recorder. She asked good questions. At the end, she asked the one question everyone wanted to ask. Ma, when you were sitting in that middle seat, between the man sleeping on your shoulder and the woman with the headphones, what did you feel? Margaret thought about it for a long moment. I felt what millions of people feel every day, when someone looks at them and decides they are less than they are, based on nothing real. She paused. I felt that, and I thought, this feeling should not be normal. It has become normal, but it should not be. Were you angry? I was sad. Anger passes. Sadness asks you to do something about it. The journalist wrote that down. Her pen moved slowly, like she was being careful with the words. And your staff, Kevin and Stephanie, do you forgive them? Margaret looked out the window. They were not monsters. They were people who had learned without knowing they were learning that some passengers matter more than others. That was the lesson I had allowed to grow in my own airline. Without seeing it, she paused. So yes, I forgive them, and I forgive myself. And then we do better. A year later, Lagos International Airport. Margaret Adora Okonkwo walked through the same terminal. Same plane wrapper. Same brown bag. Same old leather slippers. She walked to the first-class check-in desk. A young woman looked up. New staff member. 3 months in. She had gone through the retraining program before she had even started her first shift. She saw the old woman. She smiled. A real smile. Good evening, Ma. Welcome to Okonkwo Air. She processed the ticket efficiently, carefully, with full attention. Your seat is ready, Ma. Can I arrange for someone to assist you to the lounge? No, thank you. I know the way. The young woman smiled again. We're glad you chose us, Ma. The old woman stopped. She looked at the young woman. Something moved through her face. Not sadness. Something older than sadness and softer. Thank you, she said quietly. She walked toward the gate, slowly, in old leather slippers that had walked 1,000 miles. At the entrance to the first-class lounge, she stopped. She looked back at the terminal, at the desks, at the people moving through. Passengers with their bags and their tickets and their tiredness and their destinations. Ordinary people, every one of them somebody. Every one of them with a story she would never know. She thought of Emmanuel. She thought of that first small aircraft. She thought of the 11 passengers. And she walked through the door. Emeka was promoted the following year. Head of passenger experience. Africa and Middle East. He moved to Abuja, got a small apartment, sent money home to his mother in Enugu every month without fail. He called Margaret now. Everyone did. One evening, he was in her office late, going through staff development reports. She was at her desk reading. The office was quiet. After a while, she looked up. Emeka, Ma, do you remember what you wrote in that letter? That you were willing to accept whatever consequence came from your silence. He nodded. Was there a consequence? He thought about it. Yes, I had to live with it, knowing I had seen something and said nothing. That does not go away. She looked at him. No, it does not go away. She went back to her reading. That is how it should be. He sat with that for a while. Then quietly, Ma, do you ever wish you had not gone to the airport that night? Before everything happened, do you ever wish you had just stayed here and let someone else handle it? She put her papers down. She thought about the middle seat, the man asleep on her shoulder, the young woman with headphones, the 4 hours of sitting in a seat that was not hers on a plane that was. She thought about Chisholm on the low wall outside the old building in Surulere. No, She picked her papers back up. Some things need to be sat through before they can be changed. Emmanuel Okonkwo had a saying. He said it often enough that it became part of the language of their marriage, part of the air inside their house. He said, "The day you stop seeing people is the day you stop deserving what you built." She had put on the wall of every Okonkwo Air office. Not with his name, just the words. Because the words were true, whoever said them. And truth does not need a name. It just needs people willing to live by it. She flew again the following month. Lagos to London. She sat in first class, the seat she had paid for. Somewhere over the Sahara, at 35,000 feet, she opened her brown bag. She took out a small photograph. Emmanuel, 1989, the first aircraft. That grin. She held it for a while. "We got 47 wrong," she said quietly. "Probably more." She looked at the clouds outside the window. "But we are fixing it." She put the photograph away. She ordered tea. And somewhere above the desert, in the seat she had always belonged in, Margaret Idora Okonkwo closed her eyes. And for the first time in a long time,